Hi, I'm Brad LaPorte, Gartner veteran and partner at High Tide Advisors. I'm an expert in ransomware, and today I'm going to go through Ordr's new ebook, Ransomware. These 4 best practices could save you $4 million. $4 million representing the average global cost of a data breach that's incurred on a daily basis, which basically accounts for over 4,000 attacks a day around the world. That's occurring every 11 seconds. In this document, I go through each of the kind of the history and core facts around ransomware in terms of what the total costs are and how that's breaking down, and also how that's increasing over time. On average, downtime due to ransomware attacks is over 21 days. And the time that it takes to overcome and fully recover from an attack is over 287 days, amounting to a total cost of over $300 million in 2020 alone, which is a number that is increasing over the course of 2021. The average cost per organization is $312,000 US dollars. So as you can see, this is very rapidly becoming yet another global pandemic. Over time, ransomware has had ebbs and flows. And in the early 2015, 2016, and even 2017 timeframe, the adoption rate of endpoint detection response technologies, which are really instrumental in combating ransomware, both from a prevention perspective, but also a detection and response aspect. The adoption really hit a critical mass in 2017 and 2018 as more and more criminals shifted towards wireless-based attacks. So with the advent of WannaCry as being a major catalyst behind that, that actually pushed things forward in terms of organizations getting serious about their cybersecurity. Now, it took about 2 years for cyber criminals to actually shift their tactics and move towards more of an access of a service perspective. So what ended up happening is they ended up creating their own managed security service around ransomware, and the top tier criminals that had the expertise would actually infiltrate the environment and then sell that access to lower tier, lower skilled organizations, therefore eliminating the barrier of entry that it takes to actually conduct an attack like this, which basically catapulted the amount of attacks that you see in 2020 and 2021 and beyond. And this combined with the fact that these criminals are collaborating with each other, they're working as a community, they have full-blown marketplaces that are accessible, and anything can be purchased for the right amount of money. And it's become a very cost-effective and efficient way to unfortunately wreak havoc on the world in terms of these types of attacks. And as you can see in the bottom, there are very notable attacks that have occurred this year that have been very sizable in nature, and some organizations being forced to actually pay the ransom to actually become operational. And there's a lot of challenges to this, and in addition to that, the amount of organizations that are reporting data breaches, as seen by the research that was done by Hack Notice, as well as research that's been provided by Gartner, that every year that goes by, more and more organizations are actually reporting less that they're actually experiencing a data breach, primarily because of the negative reputation impact that comes with. So no one actually wants to see their company on the front page of the newspaper. And the research has been found that now only 13% of organizations are actually reporting data breaches. So as bad as it actually seems, it's actually significantly worse. Actually 7 times worse than it might actually appear. And it's not getting any better. And there's actually a lot of governmental legislature that's being discussed not only in the United States, but also in other countries in terms of being able to, actually enforce these companies to actually report a data breach, and having actually heavy fines, and able to enforce them to actually, work as a collaboration, be a transparent entity to increase the betterment of the greater good. And while this is happening, the actual criminal tactics that these cyber criminals are implementing are actually shifting. One of those being actually distributed denial of service attacks. So organizations that, it's not just implementing ransomware into your environment. You could choose not to pay that, but if you are a pay-for-click type organization, or an entity that relies on the availability of your product or service, if a criminal is actually threatening you with a DDoS attack and you don't have the means to mitigate that, typically with a content delivery network and a web application firewall, or having the robust infrastructure to take the large amount of impact that might be targeting your environment, they can use that as a weapon to basically force you to pay that ransom. In addition, there's lateral movement. So actually, infecting devices that might be, from your home laptop, and then bringing it back to the office, or going on vacation, or going somewhere and bringing it back in. Unfortunately, that is a major entry point that could be used to implement that. Another tactic that's been increasing is insider threat. An insider threat actually comes with two major facets, one being a recruitment program. So actually enticing you and saying, I'll give you $1 million if you deploy ransomware in your environment, which we've seen in the Tesla factory, and a couple other recent examples that have taken place where they're being enticed to do that. And there's also the aspect of kind of espionage and doxing, where they're actually using blackmail. So either information about that particular employee, typically of higher stature in the C-level or key stakeholder, and either forcing them and saying, I'm going to exploit this information if you don't pay the ransom, or basically deploy ransomware in this environment and bypassing these security controls in order to implement this. So that's a form of insider threat, but also extortion. And using this kind of what's known as doxware to implement this, and going after these high-profile individuals. Another aspect is just IoT. So IoT in general, and there's over 28 billion IoT devices in the world and counting. They're literally everywhere, and the expanding attack surface, especially in certain industries like the healthcare industry, being able to walk through that, and if you're effectively, your attack surface is expanding over 20%, even more in some cases, to combat the global pandemic with COVID-19 and all the healthcare needs that are needed around that, or just increasing the amount of factories that are needed in terms of being able to meet the demand of the growing supply chain. And the expansion of just the overall digital economy that exists today, and more and more assets, and more endpoints, and more IoT devices that are now entering into the environment. And then the last item is using multiple different factors in combination. So not just one, but actually having the ransomware attack, and you have extortion, and you have an insider threat, and you have a DDoS attack, all these different elements that are being targeted to you, and having it be a multiple punch combo that basically have it be a total knockout for your organization, and effectively taking you from being the most advanced technological organization right down to going back to using pen and paper. So, in terms of best practices, it really comes down to focusing in on the basics. In the research that I've done in the past, and several publications that I've released, over 90% of the people that I've interviewed and worked with over the years, over 90% of them could have been prevented. It's something that they knew that they needed to do, and it just wasn't a priority for the organization. They didn't implement it. Big offenders being multi-factor authentication and it being remote desktop protocol and not having strong authentication methods, or basically having access to it when it really wasn't needed, and restricting the access to individuals that didn't need to have access to it. And then overall, just educating what's called the human firewall. So the actual employees and organizations, and making sure that they know what their job function is, and what best practices are, and how to prevent these types of attacks from happening in the first place. So in terms of focusing on those basics, but you also want to improve every day. You want to drill often. You want to focus on that operational readiness and treat it like a fire drill, and just improve day after day after day. The other aspect is having an actual plan and being able to implement who is actually responsible, accountable, consulted, informed for all the critical tasks that are important to your environment, and having that across the entire process that you have, not only for your cybersecurity, but your IT operations and your business continuity and your disaster recovery. And not only that, but just enforcing it and going through that fire drill and maintaining that governance. And if everyone knows what their job is, it's easier to execute in the event that there is an actual attack that occurs and an incident that needs to be responded to. Continuously improve. So day after day after day, being able to understand what the known knowns are, what the known unknowns are, and what the unknown unknowns are. So there's only so much that you can prepare for in every scenario, and increasing your preparedness around that and your operational readiness, and improving that, and overall reducing your risk exposure will ultimately best set you up for success in the event of a crisis. So these are all key elements that are really foundational. And last but not least, implementing zero trust. Zero trust is not necessarily a SKU that you can go to the grocery store and scan, at least not yet. And it's a concept. It's implementing the right best practices around who should have access to that data at what time, and having it be audited and governed and implemented and supported by leadership, not only upwards and downwards, but also horizontally throughout the entire organization. So, taking these best practices and implementing them across your organization, using this ebook as an asset to take it step by step, and understanding where this is, and also ultimately not being a lone wolf, and working as a group, as a community within your own industry, within your own geography, and any way possible that you can work with the community to best improve your environment. So thank you for reading this asset and listening to this overview, and ultimately helping you improve your cybersecurity posture.